Hello everybody, welcome back to another light novel review. Today I'm talking about volume number 1 in Asari Endou's light novel series Magical Girl Raising Project. Now, this story takes place with a new iPhone or, smartphone app that has come out. It's a game called Magical Girl Raising Project. And one of the rumors surrounding this game is that if you get good enough at it and achieve certain things and who knows what else, you may actually just find yourself becoming a real, honest-to-goodness magical girl. And in fact, this is exactly what happens. The only problem is that eventually the management of the game says, you know what, this one particular city, there just seems to be too many of you. So we need to cut it back. So we're going to have sort of a competition. In the game, by performing good deeds, you earn what they call candies. So the people who have the least amount of candies every week, the person who has the least amount, they'll be eliminated. They'll cease to be a magical girl. The only thing is that ceasing to be a magical girl means you die. Now with this book, it's basically like if you ever wondered what would happen if Battle Royale and Madoka had a baby. Welcome to Magical Girl Raising Project. We have 16 characters who are forced into basically a game of death where they eventually come up with different ideas about how it is they could perhaps avoid elimination. And we see this, degradation the way we do in most sort of stories like this, where we start off with characters with a lot of ideals and, questioning how can this happen and everything else, and eventually sliding down, we get darker, more violent, and then we, of course, get our conclusion. Now, with this book, you should say that it feels like a self-contained volume. It does have, in fact, an ending. It's not like this game of death is going to be extended over God knows how many volumes. This particular one does end with this novel. Now, I've heard from a few of you who have read the fan translations that future novels detail other sort of magical girl raising projects with different characters, and that some future volumes do involve characters from this book, but not every single volume of Magical Girl Raising Project, the series, is necessarily a sequel to this one. The book works pretty well if you are looking for something that is full of quite a bit of action. Of course, you have 16 people in this, so they're going to get eliminated, and so the pacing is pretty quick because it's not really a huge book. Like, the print edition that I have is under 200 pages. So, you pretty much move from conflict to conflict to conflict. Things move very quickly. It's a very good pace if you're looking for something that's like that. I would say, though, that in terms of a fulfilling reading experience, that this book probably suffers a little bit because of that. I almost wonder if this is one of those books where it was written with the idea of entering into a competition, that idea that the book had to be completed in a single volume in order to qualify for a competition, or I don't know, maybe the publisher was like, yeah, give us one and we'll see whether it works, and then agreed to more later. I don't know, because it really does feel that a lot of really good stuff was stripped out of the book. So, for instance, if you know what, I'm going to compare it to Battle Royale, because Battle Royale is probably one of the closest books that I've personally read, and of course it's also from Japan, so it's certainly applicable, where you have a very large cast of characters that are stuck in a game of death. Now, with Battle Royale, what really worked for me in that book was the fact that even though you had all these characters, the author really seemed to have a good grasp and control over those characters' histories, that they were able to just reveal enough information about that character to make you care that when they ultimately died, it did impact you. In this book, not many of the characters get that. It is, you get just enough to sort of get a feel for a character and then they die. Or you get almost no feel for a character and they die. It kind of removes a bit of the emotional aspect out of the book. In fact, I would say that The character of Snow White is one of the more developed characters. And I think that's because she represents, and I mean, this is thematically, this is another thing that I thought I would have liked to have seen explored a little bit more. So Snow White basically represents the ideal of what a magical girl should be. Like, she is the epitome of a magical girl as we typically see in things like, Sailor Moon, Pretty Cure, all that kind of stuff. The really good-hearted girl who believes that magical girls have these abilities in order to help people selflessly. And of course, that ideology comes up in a really hard way against this whole idea of I have power and I want to keep my power for the sake of myself. And those two ideals clash in this book, but I don't feel that they get resolved in a way that thematically feels strong. The theme of this whole idea of what is a magical girl, what does a magical girl mean, what does it mean to be a magical girl, it really only matters so much in establishing Snow White's character. It isn't something that I think is explored as much as it could be or perhaps should have been in the book to make it a really satisfying experience. And so, with Snow White being the more developed character, I would say that the deaths, some of the deaths, not all of them, but some of the deaths, of course, the emotional impact is because of how it supposedly impacts Snow White. But again, because of the pacing of this book, we really don't see that emotional impact as much as what I think we could. And because we flip from so many points of view, it's not like the book is told from Snow White's point of view. She is just one point of view character that I would say gets a little bit more screen time than others. Because she's not exclusively our point of view character, there's lots of times that we spend in the book not with her. So again, it's harder to form that emotional bond with her as a character. That would mean that, her suffering becomes our suffering as an audience. So in general, I think what needs to be said about this book is I like the concept. I mean, I know that a lot of people are sort of like, why do magical girls need to be dark? I mean, even Madoka, if we take a look at that series, ultimately that whole idea, it's a dark series because bad things happen to the girls. But for the most part, the girls still stay united as a team. Whereas in this one, we're looking at magical girls as opponents, as antagonists against each other. And I think that's a cool idea, and I would have liked to see that played out a bit more. Some of the battles aren't even battles. Like, we just see two people about to fight, and then, we're told that this is the person who won. We don't even actually see the battle. And that was really disappointing to me, because I thought, you've got magical girls, let's see some real powers unleashed. There were a couple of really good ones. There was one sort of extended one that was all sorts of carnage that I thought, that's cool. That's what I want to see in this book. I want to see these girls using their abilities to fight each other seriously, as opposed to, we're about to fight and fade to black. And, by the way, this is the person who lost. That happens a couple times in the book, and I felt a little let down by it all. So the concept is good. There are some good action pieces in the book in terms of sequences. It's just that everything comes down to pacing. On the one hand, good pacing in terms of it's a quick read, keeps you engaged, and you can burn through it because it is constantly moving. It has to. It's trying, like I said, 200 pages, trying to basically put a game of death in which 16 people are trying to whittle their way down to, I think it's 8 initially is what it sets out as. And I mean, because you've got all these characters and everything else, you don't get a lot of exposition. You don't get a lot of anything wasted on anything. It is like fight, 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 fight. And so on that hand, if that's the kind of thing you want, then I guess, this is a great book for you. However, that said, as much as I like books that have constant motion and moving and everything else, there are ways to do it that still allows you to build character, that still allows you to create an emotional investment with the reader, to be interested in the characters and to be invested in the things that they're going through. And for the most part, most of the deaths just left me cold. I didn't really care. It didn't make any impact really on me whatsoever because there was just no time taken to make me care about that character. So, and I mean, like I said, in terms of themes, I mean, you have a very perfect theme set up right here, this whole idea of what is it to be a magical girl. And even though that theme is presented, and even though it's discussed very lightly throughout, I really think that it could have been a lot more of a deep dive in terms of the theme to make the book all that much more interesting and compelling. I mean, when it boils down to it, because of how this is set up, it really just seems like a gratuitous book that's looking to have magical girls, cute girls kill each other. Whereas it really, like, I think the reason that everybody goes back to Madoka and says how much they love it, I mean, I love Madoka, but I think the reason that everybody goes back to it is because it really did seem like a deconstruction of the whole magical girl thing. Like, it really did present you with ideas about, well, this is the situations these girls are always in, and it's always life-threatening and everything else, but, like, what really happens if they can die, if they do die? Like, what really happens if not everybody comes home safe? What really happens if, you know, a magical girl becomes obsessive about a particular thing? What happens if, you know, what happens to these girls when they realize that they're being manipulated? I don't think that this book does that well. It suggests some of those things, but it never really goes deep enough on any of it to feel all that satisfying and all that compelling in terms of, you know, making me go, wow, like this is like revelatory, which I felt when I watched Madoka. So it's kind of a mixed feeling on this book for me. I liked it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying that I'm hating on the book. I actually kind of enjoyed it. But then again, I do enjoy my magical girls are a little bit more on the darker side of things. And Battle Royale is probably one of my favorite novels. So that whole kind of concept of merging those two things, yeah, of course, it worked for me. But I just wish that, like Battle Royale, the author had spent more time and a couple more pages to make me care more about certain characters. Maybe point of view wise, spend more time with just one or two characters that make me really invested in their story. So even if, you know, a particular character, I'm not as invested in them, but they die and it affects my main character, it would still affect me because I would feel sorrow for the main character. But so on that side, I think that Battle Royale sets that as a bar higher that I think this book really could have done well with. On the flip side, like I said, in terms of when you're going to immediately compare it to Madoka, which is, I think, the default for any kind of dark magical girl type story, when you take a look at Madoka, it looks really closely at the themes and the ideas behind magical girls and what it means to be a magical girl and how those things can become corrupted and how they can be, you know, taken over and everything else. And this one, it briefly touches that, but I don't think that it goes deep enough to really make it satisfying. And the other thing too is that ultimately the whole reasoning behind this happening and why these girls are being granted these powers, I'm sure it's probably explained or explored a lot more in other volumes, but in this one it's very much glossed over, and I found that really sort of unsatisfying. I really wanted to know, you know, what is the purpose? Like, why are these girls even being given these powers? What's the reasoning behind it? And I don't think that's ever really satisfyingly answered in the book. But again, I mean, there are, I think there's 10 volumes out by now. I seem to remember volume 10 being the last one that I saw released recently. So, I mean, there are lots more books to explore the world of Magical Girl Raising Project and what's going on sort of behind the scenes and why the game exists and everything else. So, this is all based just on volume 1, of course, and my complaints are all based on volume 1. So, those are my thoughts. Again, liked it. You know, in terms of just a nice being able to sit down and quick read, absolutely. Bang, 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 super fast pace. But at the same time, the pace does work against it in other areas that I think would have made it a truly interesting and compelling novel. So those are my thoughts on this one. Now, I need to make a confession. I had said on Twitter, and I told somebody in a comment not too long ago, that I would do Psycho May volume number 2 next. because it is a series that I really like the first volume, and it's one of the probably series that I get asked the most to go back to and continue reviewing, and I've wanted to because, like I said, I like the first volume. I'm going to break a promise. I'm sorry. I don't often do that. I usually say, when I say I'm going to review something next, I do. It's Bill's time here in my part of the world, property taxes and all that. I really don't have the cash to spend an extra $20 to pick up Psycho May. When I've got, 2 or 3 other books kind of laying around to read. So I'm going to continue with that. I get paid next week. I'll pick it up next week. I do promise I will get to it within the next week and a half, 2 weeks tops. So if you were waiting for that and hoping and looking forward to that next video, I am sorry. But, sometimes real life interferes with light novels and YouTube. So that said, what I am going to read next is a light novel that I had on pre-order from J Novel Club. And that is, If It's For My Daughter, I'd Even Defeat a Demon Lord. So I'm going to read that one next, and then after that I will probably do Re:Zero4 and then Sound Euphonium and get through those books, because of course, yes, they're sitting on my shelf waiting to be read. So if you love light novels and you're brand new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe so you can check out all of my future light novel reviews. I really appreciate all of you joining me in this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then. Bye-bye for now.